Kia ora, everyone. Before we get started, can everyone see and hear us okay? Give us a yes or a thumbs up in the chat if you can. We'll just wait for that to start coming through. Make sure we're all good. I'm not going to jinx it. I was going to say we've already had our technical difficulty for the day, but oh yay. Hello, Natasha. Hello, Christina. Hi, Bradley. Yeah, great. So welcome to a special episode of Lunch Money. Today we're celebrating International Women's Day. So I'm Sonya, one of the co-founders and CEOs of Sharesies, and this is Brooke, one of the co-founders and CEOs of Sharesies. And the whole point of Lunch Money is it's a really cool chance for us to chat about what's happening in the share market and the wider world. And we really like to make sure that we're having conversations. People don't talk about money enough. And so we're trying to just break down some of the barriers there and have conversations. So today, because it is International Women's Day, and the whole reason around that is it's a global day celebrating the achievements of women and raising awareness about women's equality. The theme for this year is about generation equality. And so we wanted to have a conversation around women and money. So we're stoked to be joined by two wonderful women who are passionate about how we can make money more inclusive. We've got Frances Cook, who's the host of a personal finance podcast, Cooking the Books, and also the author of Tales from a Financial Hot Mess. We're also joined by Kendall Flutey, who Kendall is a co-founder and CEO of Banqer, which was started in 2015. Banqer is a social enterprise that's committed to raising societal financial capability levels through relatable and engaging education. I'm getting tongue-tied over here. But the Banqer team is made up of passionate people dedicated to making a difference in their own backyards and further afield. We'll hear from Frances and Kendall soon. So just a reminder, if you have any questions, please submit them through the Ask a Question button down below. We will be trying to make sure we cover the questions related to today's topic, and if we don't get around to any that are more Sharesies related, we'll try and cover them after it. So that's the way we can stick to time. And just a legal disclaimer, nothing we talk about today will be personalised advice. We don't know what's going on in your own situation, so it is just all really general. And please be kind and respectful towards our speakers and your fellow viewers. Otherwise, we'll have to remove you from the webinar. So just please be good sorts, and we'll have a great convo. So first, welcome, Frances. Can you tell us a bit about yourself and how you started getting into writing and talking about financial services?
All right. Well, hi, everyone. So I am a journalist, have been a journalist for ages. And as you might have guessed from the title of my book, Tales from a Financial Hot Mess, have not always been great with money, have not always been across what money means. And I hit a point in my life where it was just ridiculous that I didn't know the first thing. So I shamelessly leveraged my job to my advantage and started covering personal finance. And the best thing about being a journalist is you call people up who are experts in their field and say, hi, it's Frances from the Herald. And they give you the time of day and they share all of their amazing knowledge with you. So I've been doing that for the last several years, have been researching this and host the Cooking the Books podcast, of course. And I would like to think I am living proof that you can educate yourself to really do a 180 and that it's actually not as hard as people would have you think.
Oh, I can't wait to dive into that more coming up too. And I'm such, if you're watching this, I'm such getting Brady Bunch vibes, with the four, we should look up and wave down at each other. But hey, thanks for that, Frances. And Kendall, over to you. Tell us a bit about you and why you're so passionate about what you do at Banqer.
Sure, kia ora koutou, ko Kendall Flutey tōku ingoa no nai tahu no ngā te kahununu ki Wairarapa Hoki. It's awesome to be here today. A little bit about my background. I'm a failed accountant. I've always been curious and interested in money, and I thought that meant the career path of accountancy would be good for me. It wasn't. I left that and I retrained in software development, and it was soon after entering my first software gig. I was working at Abletech in Wellington at the time, but my little brother inspired the idea for Banqer. And he was 12 at the time, and he was just coming up with all these financial terms, prying everything commercially out of me. And it was his teacher that was teaching him this stuff. And that really inspired me to be more involved in his financial trajectory as my little brother, given my background and my interests, but also plants the seed for what we get to do now. So I'm really fortunate that Banqer sort of sits at the intersection of, failed accountant and software developer. And we now work with, we've worked with 150,000 Australasian kids over the last 6 years. So, yeah.
Fantastic. Thanks heaps, both of you, for being on here. So we'll crack into some questions. And I guess to frame the conversation, Sharesies, we do an annual survey with Colmar Brunton about every year around Kiwis' attitudes to saving and investing. And in previous surveys, we've found that there's a difference between how women and men view money. For example, fewer women believe the share market is accessible to them than men, and fewer women feel knowledgeable about investing in shares. While this is changing, there is still the gender investment gap. Frances, you've talked a lot about this in the past. Do you mind talking about what is the gender investment gap, and why is this important?
Yeah, so there's stacks of research around on this, and the numbers can vary across different studies, but every single one finds that fewer women have the confidence to invest than men do. And one of the most recent figures I saw was that women invest 40% less often than men. Now, that's a pretty alarming number to me. Part of it, I feel like, is just the cultural image. You Google investor or stock market investor, and the pictures that tend to come up is older white men, and that's what people think of. But it's such a shame, because when women do invest, on average, they get better results than men do. I mean, women tend to invest and then just leave it alone. They don't get sucked into trading as much, which that just means shuffling your money around, trying to buy cheap and sell high. Obviously sounds good in theory, but in practice, almost everyone fails at it. And there was this pretty landmark piece of research back in 1998 that found men miss out on an extra 1.4%, I think it was, of profit each year compared to women because of that, which when you think about the average return is about 7% a year, that's massive. So we've got all of these women on the sidelines feeling like they're not good at this, feeling like it's not their domain, that they're not the investing type. And yet, when women take the dive and actually do it, they're so good at it. So it's this very frustrating problem for me. And I think part of it is just changing the way that we think about this, the way we talk about investors, getting rid of some of those stock images of old white dudes, because honestly, that's not the reality anymore.
Yeah, I totally resonate with that. Quite often I'm asked, or told, women just don't want to be investors. And it's like, no, that like they do. And we're already seeing that in the growth of new investors recently. Around 50% are women now, from an Australian survey I read. And on Sharesies' platform, around 49% of our investors are female, identified as female. So there definitely is a need there. It's just about creating an inclusive environment where, and a platform really, and kind of breaking down some of those barriers that have just been there. But Kendall, do you see, are there any differences you observe in kids with your work with children?
No, and that's the awesome thing when we think of this next generation coming through. So we started off in the primary school space, and primary school kids don't lack confidence by any means on the whole, right? So they're happy to ask those questions that we would probably categorize as dumb questions. They're not. They're just the first time they're broaching this subject. So it's really fascinating to see that money behaviour playing out in the younger generation who perhaps haven't had societal pressures pushed on them yet, or don't quite can't read those nuances that past generations have, or older individuals have. As we work up in the secondary school space, we do see that boys tend to interact with the stock exchange functionality in our platform a lot earlier and sooner, but by the end of the experience with the platform, it's really balanced. So it's really exciting for the next generation.
Yeah, cool. And this is a bit of a question for all of us, so I think we'll just I want everyone's opinion on this, but we'll start with you, Frances. Why do you think it's important for women and girls to be engaging with money?
Oh God, can I take the whole rest of the time to just get on my soapbox about this? Okay, I will try to not hog the time. But first of all, I think it's important for everyone to invest. I'm a huge believer that everyday normal people should build whatever version of financial independence is right for them. And every dollar that you put to work investing is buying you a day that you don't have to work. That's a beautiful thing. For women, it is particularly important to really prioritize learning about investing. The basics of it are not hard. It's so much simpler than people expect. And it's going to help you through the financial headwinds that women face. And I get hate mail whenever I talk about this or write about this in the newspaper, but I'm afraid it's facts. There's a pay gap. The 2018 figures from Stats NZ found that women are paid 9% less than men on average. The gap is, of course, worse for Māori and Pacific women. We do take time out of the workforce if we choose to have children. I am pregnant currently, and let me tell you, I am making a lot of financial changes right now to make that impact as small as possible, but it's still going to hit, no matter what. You can make it smaller. Women also live longer than men, so we need more for retirement. And all of these things can add up to mean that there are more older women in poverty in retirement than men are. Like, they literally can't turn the heating on. And I don't want to freak anyone out with that. It's just that I think it's helpful to look at the cold, hard facts and then say, okay, well, how are we going to deal with them? Because actually that's to face reality and then say, now what can I do? Well, there's so much you can do. And for me, it's then taking quite an aggressive investing strategy to say, okay, I might have a couple of years out of the workforce, so I'm going to deal with that by having all of these dollars that then become my employees. When you invest, it's like sending those dollars out into the workforce for you. And it's less of a problem if your own salary takes a hit or you have to step away from your job for a while. It's fine. You've got your dollar employees working for you and smoothing out those bumps. And I think, it's important for everyone, but particularly important for women because we do face those issues.
Kendall, did you have anything you wanted to add?
I mean, I think that's been summed up so eloquently, especially at the individual level. I think if we were to extract that back out to the societal level as well, if we have a whole cohort, a whole gender investing, that will have huge ramifications for the kinds of companies we're seeing as well. When women make different financial choices to men, that can influence, the success of our economy and financial ecosystem at large. So there's not only those individual benefits and whānau benefits, but New Zealand could potentially thrive as a result as well of more women investing.
Yeah, cool. How about you, Brooke? Do you have anything to add to that?
I think, I had 4 points come to mind and they've all been covered, which is, women live longer. I'm just going to repeat them. We are more likely to take a career break and then that impacts your superannuation, your KiwiSaver along with your income. And then, we unfortunately earn less, and part of this is generation equality, and we need to just make sure that doesn't happen anymore. And I see some companies in New Zealand really making strides there, and I think the government has too, so let's get that closed. And then the fourth key point is, we have money in the economy, and it goes back to what Kendall was saying. It's like we can help create the world we want to see and back businesses that really align to our values and our beliefs. And so having our money work harder for us and for society, ultimately everyone will thrive, and so I'm excited about that. Sonya.
I think really good chats. I think what pops into my mind is that that there really is no reason, and we'll probably talk about reasons. That'll be a question that comes up, but why we're not. But I think around how important the stories we're told about ourselves and how the stories we tell about ourselves. And I think this is just a story that we've been told, and I think it's important that story changes, that we can be investors, we can be great with money, that it's a conversation we're not just a part of, but that we are a part of. I guess that it is part of the world, like what Kendall was saying. It's bigger than just money. It's about creating a really diverse and inclusive community, environment, world, all of these things. So yeah, I think it's really, really important that story changes and that we're really part of that too.
Yeah, so talking about that story changing, what are the barriers that we think might be stopping women from engaging with investing or their money? And do we think that there's changes happening there? And what can we do about it? Kendall, what do you think?
Yeah, I totally agree with Sonya. I think it's around that historical narrative, and that's perpetuated in the home. So, you know, my husband was taught about money by his dad, but his sister wasn't. That's an interesting observation. And also the technical jargon, it has been a historical barrier for some people who think that they can't access it. But I'm totally seeing a huge shift. I mean, you know, look at Shiaziz speaking in everyday language to these different audiences and demographics as well. So when someone intentionally speaks to you, you start to feel heard, right, as an investor or as a consumer of any kind. And additionally, when we have parents like Frances who, regardless of gender, are going to ensure that this financial education happens in the home, not just if you're a boy, we're going to see generational change. So it's exciting from my perspective. I'm biased because I'm in it every day, financially educating regardless of gender, whatever. But those barriers do exist, and I think we need to name them, acknowledge them in order to start bashing them down, really.
Yeah, Sonya, do you got anything to add to that?
Yeah, I do think, you know, just going off what Kendall said around this intergenerational or almost the stereotype around women and money as well. And I think it shows up in lots of places, but I think, you know, it can be often how like women are portrayed in media and shows about like credit card debt and spending and like buying shoes, and you know, all of those things are dangerous as much as not talking about, you know, the cool stuff like taking risk and investing and those types of things. So I think it's about, you know, I think how women have been categorized, you know, are almost like favoring one type of conversation or one type of money interaction, which is like being typically quite bad or consumerism style spending versus investing and taking risk there. And yeah, so I think that's a big part of it from what I see as a challenge.
You just reminded us. No, sorry, you could go.
No, you go.
You just reminded me of the story came to my mind when you talked about credit cards. I'll never forget, I was in the lift once at university and one of my finance lecturers came in the lift. It was just me and him in the lift, and I was, I don't know, getting my student ID out of my wallet or something. And he was like, oh, you've got a lot of credit cards there. And I was like, actually, I didn't have one. I was petrified of credit cards when I was a student. And it was obviously this narrative he had in his mind because, I don't know, I did like clothes and things like that. But I don't know what it was, but it was quite interesting that, you know, seeing that so clearly in that moment. Yeah, Frances, what about you? What barriers do you see that might be stopping women?
Isn't that funny? People seeing what they expect to see.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've got to agree with Kendall's point when she said about the jargon. And I think there's a lot of jargon around. And from the outside world, the financial world can look quite complicated and quite uninviting. Now, let me say, as someone who also came into this as a newbie and had to figure it all out, I've actually found so many of these clever financial people are so lovely and they're so eager to share their knowledge. They want to help. It's just they've often, you know, they've got so much education. They've been doing this for so long. They forget that the big words that they're using aren't actually normal words and make things sound more complicated than they are. And then once you sort of, you dip a toe in the water, you realize that a lot of those big words are actually just big words for really simple ideas. And you're thinking, oh, what took me so long? That's actually a super simple concept. You're just using a 4-syllable word to describe it. And, you know, you can make investing complicated if you want. Some people enjoy a really complicated investing strategy, but some of the best investing strategies are so simple. It's basically put your money in and leave it alone. So I think that's a big barrier, and getting more people to use the normal words to describe these concepts is big. But I also think one of the things is just the touchiness around money in general, right? People are scared of looking silly, scared of looking like they don't know what they're doing, because money is so tied into a lot of really core concepts of identity, how smart we think we are, how important we think we are. You know, if you ask someone how much they're paid, what they tend to hear is how valuable are you? And so that's, you know, one reason why people just clam up, even though it actually helps to talk about how much we're paid, and people tend to get paid more when we talk about that. So we miss out on a lot of learning from people all around us, because people would rather climb up than risk looking silly. And I think, yeah, once you start dipping a toe in the water, you start demystifying these things. It's so common. I get so many messages from people who say, I don't know why I waited so long. It's not that hard. And I'm like, yeah, me too. But what can you do? You just start when you start.
Yeah, I think you touched on like the importance of talking about it, and talking about money with our friends and our whānau. It doesn't have to be about amounts. It doesn't have to be that at all. It's just sharing those tips and tricks and learnings we've been able to experience. And I think, I could really think about that home bias, or what you learn in the home, and also like the system bias too, in terms of, the financial systems typically have been set up for men, and the majority of financial advisors were men too. And I remember hearing often stories of when couples would go and talk to the bank, that the man in the relationship would get most of the eye contact and the questions directed at them. And I think it's all those kind of interactions that show that systemic problem of just being excluded, essentially. And we're part of a shift there, all of us, and what the mahi we do. But I see that's got to keep happening, and changing those micro moments to the system, I guess, in some ways, in order to create equality.
It's definitely it's a thing I like to call almost like anti-marketing, where where you feel like something isn't for you. And I don't know if it's just intentionally, but I definitely know before Sharesies, when I was looking around trying to invest, you'd go to websites and you'd see, as you mentioned, Francis, you Google investor and you see men, and that's typical, and men in suits. And I know we're like, none of us are wearing suits here. Brooke, you're wearing a fantastic blazer, but none of us are wearing suits. So I think there is something about that where that feeling of like, this isn't for me. And coming into that jargon piece, like I was asked to speak on a panel recently, and it came through, and I was like, I don't know what this means. And I said to Leighton, I can't do this one. You'll have to do it. I don't know what this means. And he just said, hey, look, this is what this means. You know what this is. You deal with this all the time. But because I'd never heard it used in that jargon, it was immediately like, oh, I don't think this one's for me. This means something kind of scary. So I think it still happens no matter how, like, been in this industry like over 4 years now, and it still kind of pops up like that and gets you sometimes. So when we think about some of those barriers, and and there's also this aspiration, I guess, of wanting to change how things are, we'll start with you, Kendall. What's one thing you'd like to see change with money and future generations?
Ooh, money and future generations. Well, again, I will state I am very biased, but for me, it does come back to education and curiosity, and making the most of that curiosity. I think I've spoken about it earlier, but we see in the primary school space, kids will ask all of those questions, and they're not going to clam up. They're going to put it out there regardless. So there's a stage, obviously, that society or our family or whatever it is washes that out of us, and there's a change for the individual. And I would love to see us hold on to that curiosity and that confidence, and for that to build over time, and to be educated to the point where we can engage really positively in the financial world. So just a small ask from me, but if I was to have my genie pop out of a bottle, that's what I'd be wishing for.
How about you, Francis?
Yeah, I'd love to see just more open conversations about money, more of us feeling unashamed to say, what on earth does that mean? And give it a quick Google. You know, we've got so many resources at our fingertips now that you can just go out and find the most amazing information from world experts for free. But often you don't even know what you don't know. And so many of these thoughts of, oh, I want to know more about that, comes from just conversations that you have with people. So I would love to see money becoming less of a taboo, the idea that, you know, you have to know everything before you say anything. Learning about money is lifelong. It should start when you're young. It should continue until you're old. But that shouldn't stop you from getting involved. You know, if you're about to jump on a fitness kick, you don't wait until you're a qualified personal trainer. You know, you do a bit of research and think, oh, I'm trying to do this or that, and oh, that sounds like it'll work. And then you keep looking it up as you go, but you know, you give it a crack. So I would love to see people just talking about it more with each other and supporting each other, and less of this sort of shaming around money. And I just think there's an opportunity for us all to lift each other up and work together a bit more on this.
How about you, Brooke?
Cheers. And when you say, you know, lift each other up, I really think about what Kendall was talking about there too, and like lifting the future generation up into, and that's not just about having those conversations in our friend group, it's having it with the children in our lives too, I think. And I've got a 3-year-old, and I totally understand that confidence and kind of the why part. And I did read a study that starts to change at around the age of 12. I'm not sure why, but I think I just want to try and accelerate at that as much as possible. But when I think about the change I want to see with money in future generations, I really want to see that intergenerational wealth gap close. And I think that can happen through that open transparency and removing the taboos around money, more awareness of what equality means and how we can get there from a societal level, but also in the homes. And that sounds quite big, but I think when you're aware of these things, aware of these barriers, and you realize, oh, it's not just me, it's they're here, then it feels you can get in, and it feels more inclusive. And then individually, learning by doing, I think, and you know, that education component and what the work Banqer is doing in schools is incredible. And I'm so excited about the future generation there and what they're going to be going home and teaching their parents or their guardians too is really exciting. And so keeping that curiosity, as you mentioned, at any age, you know, like I think, and learning from any age, I think is also really helpful there.
Yeah,
and Sonya,
cool.
what are your thoughts?
It makes me think of when we were starting Sharesies and we went out and did the customer research, and we started talking to people about money and their attitudes towards it. I think the thing that stuck with me the most was how deep that sat emotionally with people, and how I think you mentioned it, Francis, around people hearing not the figure, but what that's what I'm worth, and how it's like tied into the sense of self-worth. And more broadly, it was like around, you know, these emotions like guilt and shame and a lot of things there. And I think, you know, when I think forward to the future, I think I'd love to see that change to being a positive relationship, and that it doesn't mean, or it doesn't bring up those negative things, that it can feel really empowering, that we're in a spot where, we do feel like it's not about knowing the answer, but knowing how to get the answer, and that it's just this more inclusive thing, that it isn't kind of so deeply or negatively charged. I'd love that it was this place that was really empowering for people, and how that spread.
Kia ora to that. So let's have a personal kōrero. What has been your personal experience starting either to invest or just with money as a woman, and seeing other women in your life either invest or with money? Like, what's your any kind of personal stories or experiences you want to share there, Kendall?
Totally. My money journey sort of has been a game of two halves, I guess. When I was growing up, it was me, my sister, and my mum, and anyone who's had a working single parent raising them will know that it's not always easy. We certainly never went without, but it's given me an amazing perspective and appreciation for not having much and needing to be really good with your money. And I think you can go two ways when you're in that situation. This is obviously reductive, but you can avoid the situation, or you can really, get stuck into it and try and better your outcomes. And I was fortunate that Mum took this path. And in her later life, she remarried, and the man she remarried, my stepfather, is incredibly interested in money, and he sort of nurtured a lot of my personal finance passion along the way. So he ended up taking me along to his share broker at the time and just started chatting. I was a teenager then, about what this investing thing is. And from there, I guess I did sort of hunt out knowledge on the subject, and have always been sort of a DIY, self-taught, but, through everyone that's afforded me their time and knowledge. So I feel really privileged, and having that earlier perspective as well has really helped and kept me super focused on the cents as well as the dollars. Yeah, and also has wanted to there's still something inside me that wants to give back and pass those lessons on, because I totally agree with, I can't remember who said it, and maybe it's been repeated because it's a really good point, but I think in order to see this change, I think we have to, start acting that way ourselves. So in my friend group, I'm sort of the one that's annoying people by talking about money a hell of a lot and trying to normalize it to the point where, people feel comfortable talking about salaries, or, perhaps things even more sensitive going on in their life. So my journey is not over by any means. There's always something new to learn and explore financially, and there's always some new financial milestone myself or with my wider whānau to unlock. But those are a couple of the milestones in my life that have really impacted and imparted some wisdom upon me. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. What about you, Frances?
Yeah, well, investing obviously a pretty core part of my life, fairly obviously from my job and my social media and all that. But I think to me, investment is freedom, and it's a really clear line between the two for me. I'm a very independent person. Both my boss and my husband can tell you I do not like being told what to do. And to me, every single dollar I invest is a scrap more of personal freedom, and that is core for me. That is so important. When you have a nest egg behind you and it's growing and it's earning money and it's getting bigger every day, there is a sense of freedom and independence that comes with that. And if life takes a turn, whether it's a bad job or a bad relationship, you get to a point you can walk away. And it's really not even that much of a decision. You can just choose to prioritize yourself because you've already built up that nest egg for yourself. And it actually doesn't take as long in the investing journey to achieve that as a lot of people think. The peace of mind that you get from that, everything to me. Now, obviously, everyone has their own reasons for investing. Some of my friends invest, some don't. And I'm very careful because I feel like a lot of people, because of my job and how much I talk about money all the time, a lot of people can feel a bit freaked out talking to money about me again. Again, they're expecting to be caught out. So I try in my personal life not to bring up money first because no one wants to be preached at while they're getting drunk at brunch. But when other people start the conversation with me, I'm so excited. And they'll often ask, good options. How can they get started? And I'm always so excited for them to even just have the interest in getting going. Because it's a weird, uncertain world right now. And to me, I feel like you sort out your money and you build up a nest egg. You are building a wall, brick by brick, between you and the uncertainties of the world, of which there are many. And each brick is an achievement. It's always to be celebrated. It doesn't feel like much at the time, but you put enough of these bricks in your wall and you build security for yourself. It feels amazing, I got to tell you.
Sonya?
Yeah. So I think for me, probably the woman I saw with money the most would have been my mum, and I think you know, she taught me a lot of things, and like what Kendall said about the value of a dollar, or the you know, watching the cents. And I think my mum told me the story early on about going to a dairy trying to get some milk, and I think she was a few cents short, and the dairy owner wrote, "I owe you 2 cents," and she was like, "It's only 2 cents," and he's like, "Well, you know, watch the cents and the dollars will look after themselves." And to then, but then also seeing that side of investing, so seeing, I guess, taking risks. I think my mum was also always into like reading books, and I got to see like actually how you are your biggest asset, and how like learning was a really big part of it. My mum went back to work after I was born. I'm the youngest in my family, and I think you know, getting to see her grow her career later in life as well, and just through like finding a problem, working out how to get through it, reading through it. And some of the books that she had was, you know, how to invest in property and rental properties, and how to buy properties. And so I think there was this thing of like understanding that you get a choice whenever you have a dollar, and you get to choose how that gets like how that gets put out there, and that some things, although they might feel risky, you know, they can be actually like what creates great opportunity for you. And so I think getting to see that those two sides of it, where it's like sometimes it's protecting, but sometimes you won't necessarily save your way to where you're going. You also have to risk to then you know, find some big opportunities, and getting to see the working behind that and the learning behind that was really important. How about you, Brooke?
Yeah, I think like when I think of my like investing story, I think my first investment, I guess I take a broad definition of what investing is, and I also think in some investments may not have a financial return either. And so one of them, my first investment was when I was in my early 20s, and I just started working, and I wanted to support my sister a bit more at that time. Got a big whānau, and decided to fund her to go to a boarding school, because life situation at that time is what she really needed. And I always saw that as an investment in her, like, and I never expected any return, but I wanted to make sure that she could get the opportunities that she deserved. And so I like seeing investment as like creating opportunities for others also. And that was all my spare money going into that. But I think I learned a lot too. It kind of was like taught me early on when I first was getting my income too, of like setting money aside and saving it, I guess, and then realizing actually what I could live on. And I don't think I went out without much, but that's because I guess the scope of what I was expecting out of that money was kind of limited in a way too. And I think that helped me get a really good habit early on, in terms of now having a chunk that I do invest, and I grow through obviously sharesies. But you know, but I think having that habit set early on has been really powerful. Of you know, when you're first getting that income, of having a chunk going away and that being normal, rather than it, you know, introducing it later. And I think that's kind of served me well. And and my other first investment story was learning about KiwiSaver. I was like, oh, I don't know if I want 3% going away. I remember thinking that, and my manager at the time, because this was just when it was coming out, my manager at the time was like, you're getting a free pay rise. Look at it like that. You know, if you put 3% in, we're going to put 3% in, you know, and you're like, oh, true. And it was really good that he had that conversation with me. I don't know now if it would border on advice or not, but it was just really good. I think that, you know, the 18-year-old, and just helping me learn those things, even though I was studying finance and all that. I think, you know, you feel the money's tight, but then you know that it's good for your future. And so that was a really helpful lesson I think I learned early on.
Yeah, cool. And I think, so say people were wanting to start investing or have more control over their money, or get, you know, take a step forward after this in some way. What's the one thing that you'd share with them? We'll start with you, Frances.
Okay, well, I think the first thing is to just take in some knowledge. Make sure it's good knowledge, because obviously when you're starting out, there's a lot out there, and it's varying degrees of reliable. I spend far too much time on social media, and I know there's a lot of people on YouTube that I get very concerned about some of the things they're saying. So I think find some good, reputable places to just learn some things, just get used to the money chat. You know, if someone's tuning into a conversation like this, that's awesome. You're not going to learn everything in one go. Don't feel like you need to, but you will pick up at least one new thing every single time. And you find some good places like that. You know, when I first got started, I was listening to podcasts and I read a couple books and I kept an eye on the financial pages in the newspaper. And that all really helped me. And then I came to the point where I was like, I would like a New Zealand version of this, because at that point there weren't New Zealand money podcasts, and there weren't as many New Zealand money books. So that's why I made my own version, because I really do believe in the value of getting out good, vetted information. Not everything you'll find on social media is good. And then I feel like, you know, don't feel like you have to rush. Just start trying it out. And I love now that we do have these platforms like yours where you can invest $5 a time, because you can learn by doing and the stakes aren't as high. And I think that really helps with mindset. You know, mindset is also, you know, we've touched on that so much about the self-image. Well, it's also going to help you when you're getting through this. You need to have the right mindset. The market's going to go down at some point. That's a feature, not a bug. And it's actually how you make money in the long term. But it feels so unpleasant the first few times it happens. It's horrible. And so if that happens when you've put in $200 all up, you're not going to freak out the same way as you would if it was 2,000 or 20,000 and it's all the money you've managed to save and you're like, what's happening? You might know from the podcasts or books that this is meant to happen. It's entirely another thing to experience it. So I think starting out small, getting used to it, watching what happens with your money, seeing how it works, that's an awesome way to get started, and just keep taking in information as you go. It's lifelong, but you don't have to wait to be an absolute money nerd before you get started.
How about you, Kendall?
Totally agree. Education first for sure, and don't aim to get your PhD. Just in time learning is great, and know that it's never going to stop. So don't try and read it all today. You'll have nothing to read tomorrow. The only other thing I would add, because Frances summed that up so succinctly, would be just to figure out your why. Just is it for freedom and choice, like Frances? Is it to send your sister to boarding school? Is it to be the first millionaire in your family? It doesn't really matter. That's a totally personal choice, but figure that out, because you're going to start building behaviors, and when, you know, that concert comes along or something else that's pretty attractive at the time, you will commit to that behavior, that investing behavior that you've embarked on, if you have something more aspirational to shoot for.
I love that so much, Kendall, and I don't think I've ever heard it described like that as well. Like, because you get told, you know, it's like really important to find your why in your career and all these things. But I think, you know, when you are forming these habits that can hurt at different moments, like knowing that why and being able to pull to that why is like so great. It's really cool. How about you, Brooke?
I think those two answers were really awesome and bang on. And I'm also just become conscious of time. We've got 2 minutes left and I want to get through some of these other questions. So I'm going to leave you all hanging. And Sonya, you okay to leave that one hanging too?
Yeah.
Yeah, cool.
Go into the questions.
Right.
Get in there.
So there are heaps of questions, and there's heaps of questions about starting to invest, our proudest moments as investors, how the basics of managed funds and how they work. I'm just gonna skim through and go to questions that are specific to this webinar, just because, you know, in the nick of time. So I've got one here for Kendall. Happy to discover Banqer's website, big smiley face. Would you consider financial education for older generation?
Totally, yeah, never stop learning. And also we realised there's this whole cohort of people who, you know, we only started 6 years ago and we don't want anyone to miss out. We've currently got a site, I'll get the link up somewhere to register interest, and we're scoping out what a solution in that space could look like. Awesome,
thank you so much. Does Vera also asks, as I've just found, where do we go to join investing workshops for women in Auckland, please? Does anyone know of any investing workshops? I know there's Closing the Gap, and I think they're run in Auckland and Wellington. We also do share clubs, which we do online, and lunch money's like this, which are helpful. But hopefully we'll get back out on the ground this year at some stage too. Anyone else got anything to add there? No? And then I think we've covered this one, which is, what are your thoughts on being women in investing? I've been fortunate enough to not see any barriers that specifically women face in investing, so I'm interested in hearing your thoughts. Yeah, Natasha, I think we've probably covered quite a bit about that one. Yeah, I think we can just end with what's each of the one thing you want this audience to take away today, or the listeners. What's one thing you want them to take away? We'll start with you, Frances.
That it's easier than you think it's going to be. To just start taking in some knowledge, start talking to your friends about it, pick a favorite podcast, listen to it regularly. Even a couple is great. And then honestly, like, the best ways to make money are often the simplest, laziest ways. And you don't get that often in life. So take advantage of it. Investing is fabulous, and you will, once you get started, you're going to love it.
Cool. And for me, it would be, don't wait. You know, yes, we might regret not investing for the last 10 years, but the second best time is today. So get onto it, start learning like Frances says, and take those first steps.
I would say that we can change the story. All of us can change the story that we hear about ourselves, and the story that we share with others, and the story that that others are believing in themselves as well. And I think we can all have a bit and a part to play to influence that story. And I think so much, you know, part of that is also recognizing that sometimes your difference is your superpower, and helping, you know, share that with others. Like, so you don't know what that word means, you know, but you know a bunch of other stuff that's so like that might be really valuable. It's not about everyone knowing the same thing or seeing things in the same way, and that we can really change that story. How about you, Brooke?
And I'll just wrap that all up into essentially be the change you want to see in the world. And I think that's with putting, you know, investing and putting the money in the things that you really care about, and that's driving that change. And then also helping, if you see barriers in the way, finding a way to help break that down, so that we can create a more equitable generation. So, hey, thank you so much for everyone for tuning in today and listening to this because it is available in Spotify and Apple Podcasts and Google Podcasts, and that will be up shortly if you want to listen and reshare. I want to say a massive thank you to Kendall and Frances for joining Sonya and I today and having this kōrero. It's really important, and the mahi both of you do in your every day is great to just helping break down these barriers and make money more inclusive, which is really awesome. I'm excited about that next generation too and what they'll be learning. You can also see this on our YouTube channel, and that will be up later, on our Instagram. Hopefully it might come into the chat here. We're going to have a giveaway, that we're running. We've got a chance to win a copy of Frances's book, which is Tales from a Financial Hot Mess, and also a $100 Sharesies gift voucher for you and a friend. So go check that out. T's and C's apply and all that kind of fun stuff, but that's cool. And thanks again for listening to this, and here's to a generation equality. Here's a generation equality. Kia ora.
Kia ora.
Thanks, heaps.